Former U.S. President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with prostate cancer that has spread to his bones. That's according to a statement released by his personal office. While the cancer is described as aggressive, doctors say it appears to be hormone-sensitive, which allows for effective management. The 82-year-old former president and his family are currently reviewing treatment options with his medical team. The diagnosis comes just days after Biden was evaluated for a prostate nodule. Biden is reportedly at his home in Wilmington, Delaware. The news comes as health and age concerns had already shadowed Biden during his first final months in office. Biden exited the 2024 presidential race 3 weeks after a widely criticized debate performance against Donald Trump. Since leaving office, he has made limited public appearances. After Biden's diagnosis, President Trump offered his well wishes to Biden on the Truth Social platform. Vice President Kamala Harris, who took over the Democratic ticket after Biden withdrew, also extended her support, writing on X, wishing the former president a speedy recovery. Former President Barack Obama also wished his former colleague a full recovery. Biden had served as Vice President of the United States under the Obama administration. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also wished for Biden's full recovery. Also, in his first public message since being diagnosed, Biden expressed heartfelt gratitude to supporters for their encouragement. We have Dr. Ravi Gotse joining us live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Doctor, how will Biden's diagnosis affect how the world sees U.S. leadership?
Let me first say as a doctor that the patients who are listening to this and who have prostate cancer or who have metastatic disease, these days we are making rapid progress, and we can keep this cancer at bay for 5 years, 10 years. There are excellent newer treatments, there are protocols. I personally have a lot of prostate cancer patients who have exceeded expectations and they have done really well. So if any prostate cancer patient is watching this, don't lose heart. Don't be taken in by all the media hoopla that will be created around it. Prostate cancer can be treated very easily, very effectively, and we can keep the patient going for years. Now, right now, obviously, President Trump, everybody is expressing sympathy towards Biden. But then the questions will start swirling very soon as to when was this known? Because the patient first presenting with a metastatic prostate cancer that is already in the bones, I can expect to see it in like a 80-year-old homeless man who hasn't seen a physician for decades or years. But it is very, very rare presentation in a patient who is seeing the patient regularly. Now, a few years ago, PSA, prostate-specific antigen, is not very specific, but it was a routinely recommended guideline by the US preventive task forces. But there was so much confusion because some patients would have elevated PSA, would be scared that they have prostate cancer, would undergo biopsy, emotional trauma, and it would turn out that they didn't have prostate cancer. So now the recommendation has changed, and we check PSA after discussing it with the patient, and we give the patient the pros and cons of diagnosis, overdiagnosis, and the emotional trauma. But I cannot imagine that President Biden, looking at his age, I cannot imagine that what a physician says to a patient is always confidential. It's a privileged communication. But President Biden is also serving as the leader of the free world. He is the president of the United States. So the United States population have a right to know whether he is ill, whether he is capable of carrying out his duties. So I cannot imagine that his physician would not have discussed checking PSA with him. And I wouldn't know if President Biden said no to check PSA, that's a different story. I can imagine that PSA was not discussed. Looking at his profile like with the prostate cancer metastatic to the bone, I would probably say this prostate cancer must have started around 2021, just at the beginning of his presidency.
So how come this was this was not diagnosed or tracked or traced by the health checkups that presidents go through?
When we diagnose prostate cancer, it can be done two ways. One is patient comes to us with a symptom, say like a patient is having back pain, and we do x-rays and we do MRI and we found metastasis in the spine. That's kind of late in the sense we can still treat it easily, but that's a little late because it is almost stage 4 prostate cancer that is already metastatic to the bone. Another way of diagnosing it is by doing a preventive testing, like a digital rectal exam. Not too many people do digital rectal exam anymore. It is intrusive. But the PSA testing and prostate biopsies are offered. Means you won't believe that Saddam Hussein, after he was captured by US forces, he underwent a medical checkup, his PSA was checked, his PSA was high, and he was offered a prostate biopsy. Means his people might have uh, portrayed it as torture, but he was offered and done a prostate biopsy to see if he had prostate cancer. So it's very, very routine. So every year when the president gets the blood test, then I'm pretty sure they would have offered PSA. And I cannot imagine that the PSA would have been normal. So this would raise two questions. One is whether it was just carelessness that they missed the diagnosis of prostate cancer. And the second question that is serious is whether they knew it and knowingly withheld that information from American people. Now, it's a very bold and very big accusation to be made that they hid it willingly. But right now, the rumors are already swirling that they had missed the diagnosis of dementia, the mental decline, and they had hid it from people. And US had history of doing it. Woodrow Wilson, after he won the re-election in 1916, they said that he had a stroke, he was incapacitated, and his wife and his doctors were running the country, and they were unelected people. Nobody elected them to run United States. So the question is, if they were able to hide dementia, what else were they hiding? And there was an interview by President Biden done by Special Prosecutor Robert Hur, HUR. And at that time, it was painted as political propaganda. But New York Times, which is no friend of Republicans, it is extremely left-leaning, they just came out a few hours ago saying that if you listen to her interview, means President Biden didn't even seem to remember like what year he stopped being vice president, what year his son was deployed to Iraq, what year his son unfortunately died from cancer. So it looks like if he had dementia and they hid it. So the question now that will start after the initial sympathy dies down, then they'll start asking whether they knew it and whether they hid it from American people.
And do you think this news changes how voters see Biden's transparency on his health?
Means I don't think there's any doubt about, and the question is, if we are saying President Biden had mental issues, then he himself was not knowingly doing anything. There were people around him, his family, his confidants, his White House staff. They were doing it. Means if he was mentally sharp, then he would tell them what to do. If he was not, means there was these accusations going on that means they said like he was going to use a wheel. That's not a big deal. Using wheelchair is not a big deal at all. Franklin Delano Roosevelt won 4 elections for presidency, and he was always in a wheelchair. He was a victim of childhood polio, young age polio. So that's not a big deal at all, using a wheelchair. But obviously they are going to look at it and say that there was a deception. And now this deception is not simply omitting to tell a fact, but this is now will be escalated to the level of if they are knowingly misleading American people, then a lot of legal issues will come now. If the dementia diagnosis was hidden, whether the pardons that Joseph Biden signed, whether those pardons are legal, whether some of the treaties that he made, some of the decisions that he took, whether the aid that he declared for Ukraine, whether that is legal.
Right, and will Republicans ease up or double down on age and health attacks now that they see the situation with
There will
Biden?
be a tremendous sense of goodwill and best wishes coming towards Joe Biden's way for like next 5-6 minutes, and after the next 5-6 minutes are over, the politics will start.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. We move on to our next story. U.S. President Donald Trump is set to